Hey, Flooring Pros. I'm Jerry Levinson, and this is the Flooring Business Podcast, where we talk to expert flooring dealers, suppliers, marketing experts, software experts, and anyone I believe is going to help you in your flooring business. My mission is to give you good information. It's going to help you reach your goals. So if you're trying to start your business or you're trying to get over 5 million in sales, you're ready to sell your business. That's what we're going to talk about today. You're going to find useful information that's going to help you reach your goals and profit now in the flooring industry. Now, the Flooring Business Podcast is sponsored by Floors App. So, for the best flooring business operating system in the industry, contact Floors App. They'll get you up and running quick. So, in this week's episode, my guest is. So, this week we got on the podcast John O'Shaughnessy with Country Flooring. And we're going to talk a lot about how to sell a business. And especially for those of you out there that don't have a large business, there's a lot of advice that's given about selling a business, but they're talking about 8, 9, 10, 20, $30 million businesses. And I want to talk to those of you that listen to this podcast that maybe are doing $1.5 million, 3 to 5 million, and talk about how do you position your business for sale. But John, first, thanks for coming to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
And then can you tell us a little bit about how you got into the flooring business? Your business is Country Flooring. Where are you located at?
So actually it's county flooring, but that's not a big deal.
Oh, county flooring. Okay.
So I'm located in O'Fallon, Missouri, which is like 30 minutes from St. Louis. We service the whole greater St. Louis area. And yeah, I have no flooring background, no construction background. I was a double major in finance and accounting at St. Louis University, and then I became, through a long course of time, a business broker for a couple of years. And county flooring was a listing of mine. And one day, as I was showing it to somebody else, I started looking at the numbers, and I thought, this is a really, really good business. It has very low overhead. You have very few employees. All the guys are the installers are all subcontractors. We're pretty much special order only, with only a handful of stock carpets, but we don't really stock anything. So it really works well, even in like bad economic times. Like, one of the things when I was looking at this business, you look at 3 years of tax returns to get like a valuation. And I said, I want to see 5. And then I also said, I wanted to see 2008, because I figured if the business can survive 2008, can survive anything.
So that's fascinating thing to look at if you're looking at buying a business.
Yeah.
Going back, when did you buy this business?
I bought it literally 2 weeks before COVID hit. So in March of 2020. And I remember it was a lot of sleepless nights at first. I'm thinking like, oh my God, what did I just do? I bet everything I have on it, basically. But it's the damnedest thing. Fallon, Missouri never shut down. Flooring is technically essential. And people, instead of going to Disney World, they put in floors. And so 2020 was a pretty good year. 2021 was the best year in the history of the company. And then 2022, we surpassed 2021 by August. So
wow,
it was pretty incredible. And I will say, like, you and your group has been a big help. Helped me make avoid a lot of stupid decisions, and especially disputes with customers and stuff. The Facebook owners group has been extremely helpful. So
good. Yeah. So and right now things are slowing down a little bit, so it has been a little bit of a struggle, right?
Yeah. So I mean, like, this month has been a little slow. This year is a little off, but we're still making money and everything. So but yeah, I definitely put on my finance guy hat on, definitely predicted this is going to be a slower year. And probably, later in the year, we might even enter like a minor recession, just because with the Fed raising interest rates and everything, like, it's harder to borrow money. People aren't, buying and selling houses like crazy anymore,
Right.
because you just get stuck in a home. Like, you have financed a home at 2% or whatever. I mean, you're likely to move, but luckily carpet sort of has a shelf life, so you can, it gets ruined after so long that has to be replaced. But
Right. So, well, that's an interesting thought about that, because a lot of people are staying away from carpet, without realizing that the replacement of carpet is so much more than it is of the hard surface products. So how long were you a business broker for?
Just under 3 years. So I sold about 15 businesses in that time. Um, and yeah, I mean, it was an interesting thing. I was primarily, small single owner businesses, usually about 2 to 10 million in total revenue. So county flooring would have been one of the smaller ones. I think the biggest one I sold was like 11.5. It had like, 15 employees, and it was a, steel recycling business, but yeah, they're all kind of the same. I mean, really, it comes down to, first thing you do is you put together a valuation, and then, and I can, if you want to get into it, we can save that part for a different topic.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about that next. How is it that people evaluate their company?
So really, I work for a company called Murphy Business Brokers, which is based in Florida. And there was an office here in St. Louis, but basically how their model was, we would look at tax returns. You never look at their books, because you find that people, when they really, really want to sell their business, they have a tendency to lie on the books and inflate things. So we look at the tax returns, and then basically it's a multiple of what's called owner benefit, which is like, what does the owner take home? And that would be like, okay, I've got my business, like I have a truck that, I drive primarily for personal use. So the payment and all that and taxes associated would be for that. Income, health insurance, any kids that are employed by the business but don't actually work there. That's really, really common. And then like cell phones and stuff like that for family and whatnot. But yeah, that's primarily that's a simplistic way of how you value it. And then like basically, I can't remember what the number was, the multiple of that, but it was about 2 or 3 for a flooring business. Because even though they're very profitable, there's really not much here you're buying. And you don't ever, with small business sales like this, we don't ever really do what's called a stock sale. You do an asset sale. So I buy, if the real estate, if it's included,
Right.
the forklift, the racking, the inventory, all that, but I don't buy the actual like stock. So I don't buy the receivables from the previous owner. And I also, the key thing is that I don't buy the liability. So if he gets, the previous owner of my business, if I get sued for something that happened before March 2020, ain't my problem. So that actually is really helpful, because we had some situations in the beginning where, there were some angry customers and stuff. And then you can even, like, if they write you a nasty Google review, you can just say, hey, listen, like, you're not writing this about me, you're writing about the previous owner on my page. And it's very easy to take legal action. And I actually had to do that a few times, which is unfortunate, but yeah, so you would never ever buy a stock sale. So like, it's never like, I'm going to hand you a check, you hand me the keys and see you later. That you'll never ever sell a small business like.
So just for entertainment purposes, let's not brush over that last point. You had to actually sue somebody that was attacking your business that got the product before you purchased it.
Generally like a strongly worded letter from my lawyer, who's luckily my cousin, but it kind of scared the heck out of people and get them to kind of back down. It's a lot. You get these keyboard warriors that go on Yelp, and there's another store near me called Countryside Flooring, and somebody wrote a nasty review on our Yelp page, and I figured out that they were actually a customer of theirs, just got the name wrong. So I generally, with reviews and stuff, I take that pretty seriously. And I know, like you always say, like a 1 or 2 1-stars isn't the end of the world, but I always think I try to avoid them at all costs, because I know someday there'll be a situation where, it really wasn't our fault, and, I can't make it go away. So I try to keep as many positives.
Well, and we've had it, and I've had strategies for both illegitimate 1-star reviews and legitimate 1-star reviews. Yeah, sometimes you got to eat crow and face the consequences and try to either improve the situation if you are given the opportunity to, but you shouldn't be bullied. But for that customer, we shouldn't even bother with that. I was going to say, what's the recourse for a customer that bought, that you bought the business from? That's
so generally, like, that's another thing. Like, when you're buying a business from somebody, you don't really want to beat the old owner to death on price. You want them to kind of feel good about the transaction. So I gave the previous owner of my business exactly what it was worth. And he felt really good about it. And there was obviously seller finance piece, which that's the huge. So like, they're on the hook to handle those situations, and they know that, legally and everything, like their LLC will actually still exist for some time. So, yeah, you basically keep them on and they take
Well,
care of it.
and you were talking about how do you get to the evaluations 3 times multiple of an average of the previous 3 years revenue, and it might be a little bit more complicated than that, but that's how the seller is going to evaluate his business, but how is the buyer going to evaluate? Because they can have a different formula or a different way. They may go by the P&Ls. They may not consider what the owner takes home as pay. And I've had that happen to me where, the buyer is looking at it and says, yeah, we agree, we're going to give you 3 times the multiple, but his multiple was way different than mine.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously value is subjective and everybody has their own method. Generally, like with my buyers, since they were buying, a small business, like these aren't like investment bankers, with Harvard MBAs. I mean, they would generally go off, my valuation. And then, once you get into the negotiating part, then they want, less, more, I don't want this asset, or like, they own the personal vehicles or whatever, like, we don't want those, or. So, yeah, I mean, valuation is very subjective and it's different for every deal. But the most simplistic way is just a multiple of what the owner takes home every year.
Well, I was working with somebody recently too, and I was making the point that I don't know that it's fair to go with a valuation over the last few years, because the last few years was unusually great.
Anything but normal, yeah.
So is that fair to say, to use those numbers in 2020, 2021, and 2022 for your valuation when that's an outlier?
Yeah. I mean, that's what makes it so challenging, is because, an unprecedented pandemic or whatever, really kind of throws a stick in the spokes. I mean, and theoretically, I mean, yeah, sure, you can value, as long as you're, honest with in your. So we would put together like a valuation report. I mean, if you wanted to go back 5 years, you'd go back as many as 10 if you want, and do an average of that. So you get a longer time horizon to kind of spread that out. And I believe that's what they do now. And actually, one thing I forgot to mention in the valuation part is the cash component. This is huge, because I've seen on the Facebook group that people, oh, I want to sell my business. It's, this is my revenue, blah, 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 blah. And there was, I actually looked at acquiring a couple of other stores because I want to grow my footprint. And, one of them said, oh, like 50% of my revenue is in cash. And I was like, oh God, I literally, when he said that, I said, deal's dead. Because if it's more than about 8% and you're not recording it, the IRS will go through your POs and they will find it. So one good thing for people who are looking to sell is, you got to be honest about that cash portion in the valuation report. And we can add that. But see, that's one of those things where if I say, oh, the owner takes 20,000 out of the drawer every year, there's no way of really tracking that unless they kept a detailed ledger. And even if they did, any buyer is going to say, well, I'll give you like a quarter of that.
Well, and in this industry, there are some, like if you belong to a buying group, you can get a rebate once or twice a year. So they can cut you a big check that may never hit the books. That just goes right to the owner.
But see, that's why.
Does the owner disclose that in the sale of the business and say, my business is worth the X amount more because I'm taking in all this extra income?
And that's generally why we go off the tax returns, because, most of probably 90% of these businesses are, LLCs taxed as S corps. So it's like, if you put that income on your personal, you put that check that you're talking about in your personal bank account, like it's still going to flow through to the bottom line in your tax return. So
right. Yeah.
It's really, really hard to hide it unless you start really doing some shady stuff. And you wouldn't believe the stuff I saw. I mean, people would hide sports cars and, all kinds of junk.
Oh, sure.
But
yeah, I believe it. So what are some big don't do's in the business? One of them I've always said is, don't say that you could run this business better than I can. So, what are some of the big mistakes that you see people make when they're trying to sell their business themselves? Or
it's the biggest one, and I mean, I know it's been discussed on the group recently, but is people will literally stick a for sale sign on the front door, or they will post on Facebook, or, even let their employees know. And if like you're trying to sell, I mean, that's death. Like, because customers, when they see that for sale sign, oh, well, you're probably not going to want to warranty my sale or whatever. And then employees say, oh man,
Right.
there's going to be a new owner, I'm going to lose my job. They freaking bail. That's also a big problem. So that would be one of the biggest no-nos, I would think. So, and then
What
obviously,
do you tell your employees?
I mean, Murphy's policy was, basically when, you're closing the deal, that's when it was like you're in like the very final, like you sign the documents, you tell them like that day, you go in with the old owner. And the old owner would always agree to stay on for, 30 days or whatever, unpaid.
Oh, that's a
just
good
to get the
question.
new owner up to speed. But yeah, you don't really want to tell them until it's, right. Done deal.
What about the old owner of County Flooring? How long did he stay on?
He stayed on for 90 days, and I paid him for the 60. Murphy's policy was 30. And then I asked him, just because I honestly, I didn't know what LVT was when I started. I
Right.
couldn't tell you what laminate, like I knew the numbers and I understand that side of things, but he really helped me a lot. And that was one of the other things, like you give them what they want for it, a fair value, and then everybody feels great about it. And even still, like if, all my salespeople are out and I need to go somewhere or whatever, he'll come and hang out at the store and keep an eye on it for us. And,
Cool.
very, very positive relationship we've maintained, which I think is really important.
Yeah. Well, typically what happens is when you buy a company, the old owner will stay on and wants to help out, and the new owner wants them to get the hell out of the way.
Yeah, that also, I mean, yeah, I've seen that too, where in some of the deals I did, they would say, yeah, I'm good, I don't need you, especially if they were coming from a similar industry or it was
Right.
an acquisition of a competitor or something like that. Yeah, they just can them on day one. So yeah, that also happens.
Now, what's the difference between selling a business and selling a job? I mean, a lot of people are owner operators, and when they're trying to sell their business, they're really actually selling a job because the business doesn't run without the owner.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of them where you're literally buying, a job and benefits. And those businesses generally, like when you're a smaller flooring store, looking to sell or whatever. I mean, it's much, much harder. And I mean, I would say a lot of those listings would go, you sign a year contract to list, and those listings would go unsold because people just generally don't want them. And I mean, because these things are financed with SBA loans generally, and they're much higher interest rate. And you got to be careful, because I think there was a statistic that said that like 80% of all these transactions would fail within 2 years. And during COVID, it was even higher.
80% of
People that bought out another
all
business
transact.
would fail.
So the business would fail.
Yeah, because you basically, the owner would have to pay themselves no matter what, and then the debt costs would bury the business. And the banks
So
are,
yeah, you can really get to some pretty big expenses, and I always have to look at it because I've helped some people through this. Is how do you, if you're going to pay a couple $100,000 for a business, well, can you start up your own business for that kind of money?
yeah, that's the other. And I mean, if I could, morph back 3 years, I mean, at this point, I could probably just start a flooring business on my own. But I came in not knowing anything about flooring, which is why, I bought an existing operation, and especially one that can run where I don't have to be here every day. And those are the businesses where, they have the most value and they're the most likely to sell, because, I wanted to buy this and then eventually have a portfolio of flooring stores. There's several other competitors that have several in the area, and I wanted to be like that. I didn't want to just buy a job, where I come in here. And so, I mean, like for me now to go on a job site is a rarity, just because, my salespeople handle everything. We're not big enough to have like a buyer or, any of that, or a foreman or anything like that. But, I put out fires. That's all I really, do
Yeah.
other than run the business and whatnot. So that's why it was more attractive to me. It's just easier day to
What
day.
what percentage of companies never sell that go listed, and
I'd say at least half.
at
There's
least
no
half?
exact, no
And
exact.
is that with brokers? Because I'll bet you it's much, much higher when they list it on their own, like Biz Buy Sell or.
Yeah, I mean, people always complain about the 12%, and then I had so many countless times where, I'm not paying that fee. And then a year later they come back and they say, yeah, we tried biz buy sell on our own and we didn't do it right. And there's a very that's the thing about business brokers. Like there's a very specific process if you want to be successful of like things that have to be done in certain orders. Uh, and if you don't do it right, the business won't, like you have to, arrange the financing, you have to make sure, find the buyer, you have to vet the buyer, you have to, introduce them and sort of manage the process. So like especially like when you get to the negotiating and then talking turkey, uh, yeah, if you try to sell it on your own, you might have a buyer. Yeah, I want 400,000. The buyer says, "Oh, I'll give you 220." And it can get hostile and deals blow up very quickly when that happens. I saw a lot of that, even with the process we had. But Murphy Business Brokers was at the time the largest business brokerage in America, and they had very good success rates. And actually, there's a whole other thing about business brokers, but I really think that the fee is worth it if you want to be successful. And like you're going to have a business that is saleable. But yeah,
So the fee is 12%, and some of the things to consider in that too. Well, you can negotiate that fee as well, right? I mean, with a business broker, because
so
let's say
generally-
part of the asset, like I have one client who is selling the building too. So if you're just selling the building, that's 6% goes, 3% goes to one real estate agent, 3% to the other one. That doesn't seem like you should pay 12% on a building.
Yeah. I mean, there was tons of different ways to skin that cat. A lot of times the owners would want to keep the real estate and I would lease it, lease it to them. In my case, I didn't have a real estate component, but as a business broker, I was also a licensed real estate agent so that I could handle the real estate. Because sometimes people just want to, wash their hands with the whole thing and just move on. Like one of the biggest reasons people sell in the first place is the owners are older and they're burned out. Like that was
right.
My primary client was just, I'm done with this. I'm done with people calling me at all hours and, my phone number stops ringing and it's obviously very stressful to run a small
The
business.
killer though that I see all the time is they don't have a database. They may not have a website. They don't have a functioning business. It's all about them, and they could do big numbers, but there's no systems, no processes, there's nothing in place.
Yeah. I mean, the business that I bought, everything was paper invoices. There wasn't even a computer here. You go on the price books, call everything in. So I mean, it was definitely a fixer upper. I mean, now we have, a Broadloom website. We're in the process of getting Broadloom's or Rollmaster up to speed, because I want to have a more sophisticated, because the more of that you can do, the more saleable your business is.
Yeah, definitely.
And yeah, I mean, it is crazy. I mean,
yeah, absolutely. If you got those systems and processes down, you make your business worth a hell of a lot more. And there's a lot of people that are interested in buying a business out there and growing their footprint, just like you said. What would you say the number one reason is that people can't sell their business, that they have trouble selling?
It's likely it's a business that's run by somebody who, like we've said, they do everything themselves. They're too scared to delegate. And so as a result, as to a buyer, they see that and they say, I'm just buying a job. And obviously the business needs to be profitable. You need to be making, X amount, the end of every year. And some businesses are just barely breaking even. So they're not as valuable. And you got to factor in, I mean, okay, the business is where it's at with the books and everything right now, but then I got to factor in an SBA loan. Or, I mean, if the buyer has money, that's not an issue, but
Are most of the buyers pre-approved with an SBA loan? Because that process can take forever as well.
Yeah. And that was one of the things as a business broker, like I would help them. We had a preferred, several preferred banks that we would use. And I had relationships with the loan officers.
And even the SBA is looking for the buyer to come up with a percentage down, like 20%.
Yeah, it can be usually about that. Sometimes lower, sometimes more. And then the other big piece was, the seller finance piece, which scares a lot of business owners, because it's like, okay, if this guy goes bankrupt, I'm cooked. But I would,
That's,
and I,
yeah, I was gonna ask you that question. It's like typically, all right, somebody's selling their business for 1.2 million. How much down do they typically get? About
I mean, it'll be, 200, maybe 240-ish.
about
And
20%.
about 20%, and then, probably another 15 to 30% of the deal would be the seller finance piece. And I would say now, especially with rates where they are, uh, there's gonna be, I would expect it to be much, much higher.
15 to 30% is financed, owner financed, and then the balance is usually paid with a loan. So they're getting an SBA loan. They put money down, but then the owner's financing with a note.
Yep.
Oh, wow, that's fascinating. I didn't
That's
realize
how I
that.
did mine. The big thing about the owner financing is it's a big deterrent from, obviously they sign usually about a 2-year non-compete, much longer than that, so they're not forceful, but that really kind of keeps them aligned with you, so they don't run down the street and set up another store with a different name. Keeps the seller engaged. So I unfortunately with small businesses like these, it's just selling is a long process. And, for my owner of my business, it took, 3 years to be fully out. Like now he is fully out, like they're paid, the seller finance note is done. And yeah, so.
All right, so you got a business. Let's play through this scenario a little bit. 1.2 million. The broker makes 12%. I mean, this is one of the things you got to be aware of, and this is one of the reasons that they don't like. So you got 20% down, 240,000, but of that 1.2, the broker gets paid their percentage
Yeah,
after the deal's done. So the broker's taking 144,000 cash out of the 240 out of the deal.
yeah.
So
I mean, it's expensive, but it's the same idea as a realtor. And it's, like anybody could probably sell their house on their own, but like,
it's worth it. And I agree. I think look, if you without a broker, you could do this without a broker and get 800,000, or do it with a broker and get 1.2. That's the big difference. It's just
yeah,
like, using a professional CPA. Yes, they cost you a hell of a lot of money, but you save more than if you would have tried to do it on your own.
yeah. So
And then there's always so many components and legalities and things that you got to navigate through. Like
yeah,
you said, buying a house, you can get screwed on those deals if you don't use a professional realtor. So yes, you can do it without the broker, but are
it's
you
much,
really going to get as much money as you could have got with a broker who can
yeah. Plus, I
position
mean,
the
if you
business
forget, if
properly?
you try to sell it yourself, and I mean, you forget something like the non-compete, I mean, literally they could go up the street and do it, and you would have absolutely nothing you can do about it. And that would be, but
So,
yeah, little things like that you can forget without a broker as well. Yeah,
but that 12% is a hefty chunk of change because that comes out of it. Now, if the person goes out of business and doesn't make it, it's not like the broker keeps all the money from that deal.
no, yeah, the broker will keep their commission, obviously, and then the bank will keep that, but since the SBA is guaranteed by the government, that's why the banks, so they'll give them almost anybody.
So now that you have a note, let's say it was not an SBA loan, but let's say the owner financed it all. That was the deal I made in the first business I sold, is the company that bought my company financed the deal for 3 years.
Yeah.
So can you sell a note?
Uh, I mean, I never encountered that circumstance myself, but yes, I mean, I would just say as long as you got a lawyer to put together like a contract, payment terms and all that, and, transfer everything, and
Yeah.
yeah, I would absolutely think
There's
you could do
there's actually commercials for it on like financial news. So let's say you sold the business and there's a $800,000 note on the business. Once they see that the company who is making the payments is solvent and they can make it, they'll buy out the note for you, but
that. Yeah,
obviously at a discount, because that's how they make their money.
yeah. So,
And I'm not sure what that percentage is anymore. I looked into it once before because I kept looking into having them buy out my note.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine it would be a good bid. I mean, because they're assuming all the risk, and
Right.
they're obviously don't want to get paid for that. So um, yeah, that was generally something that would probably happen after a deal. And so I, as the broker, never really got into that, because usually once it was closed and everything was put together, that was where the broker kind of walks away. Uh,
So if you own the building and let's say you sell the business, you can put it in the contract. The buyer has to lease back that building for what period of time?
again, that was totally variable. It could be 7 years, it could be 15 years, however they wanted to do it. A lot of times the real estate would go with it because people, like I said, they're 65, 70 years old and they want to go play golf and fish. But
I've seen people that didn't have a business, but they wanted to sell their business and keep their real estate. And it's like, well,
yeah,
without the real estate, you don't have anything to sell.
yeah. I mean, that really that is true. So, but yeah, I mean, sometimes they want to keep the real estate and lease it to them. Sometimes they want to do the lease back. But most of the time I saw they just want it done. But yeah, I mean, there's a million different ways to do it. And then also, like with the real estate, like there can be an agreement, because you can amend the contract any way you want. Like you can take the broker takes maybe 3% commission on the real estate portion, or 1 or 0 or whatever. And then the actual business, they would take their 12%. That was probably a more common way to do it.
So one of the area I see people getting stuck the most in this kind of thing is that they don't know where to begin. They don't have any imagination. They don't know how the process. So you just said it, that you can do it. Really, you can do it anyway.
Yeah,
You guys,
there's a million
you
different ways to
can,
do it.
there is kind of a formula for evaluation. There is a way to look at the health and all that of the business, but any agreement you write, anybody can create any contract agreement, a way
Yeah,
of selling their business, just as long as you get an attorney involved and make sure that you cover all your bases.
yeah,
But you can literally do it anyway. It's just having the imagination. And that's where I've worked with some people already on this, just creating that process, the pathway to get certain deals done, whether it's a partnership or selling the business or things like that. Because what I find is a lot of them don't have the imagination to create the
yeah,
deal.
yeah. People always start off with I want to be handed a check and I hand you the keys, and then you kind of gotta, you know, show them the reality of how this is gonna go down. Because a lot of times you have people that would get really, really frustrated after trying to sell it themselves or whatever, and they just say, screw it, I'm closing it. And that happened quite often, especially with the ones that just weren't, they had too much cash or whatever. But yeah, so
Well, somebody was just posting on our forum that he's trying to sell this business and people want a note, they want to carry it. It's like, yeah, nobody's going to give you the cash money up front for your business. That's just
yeah, especially, I
it's
mean,
very rarely that it's going to ever work that way.
especially in this economy, I mean, with the way, I mean, no
Right.
politics at all, but I mean, I don't see, another 2018, 2019, or even the last 2 years. I mean, because what's his
Yeah.
name? Todd Saunders said, because I actually saw you at FloorCon. I didn't have a chance to introduce myself, but he said, you didn't make money in the last 2 years in this business, you need to get out of this business. So like those last couple of years, I mean, with the government flooding liquidity into the, market, people, with the
Right.
stimulus and all that, now we're kind of we had the fun, now we're in the hangover stage.
It's okay. You can say Biden's a jackass. We all know it. So,
Okay.
but yeah, even so, there's a way to run the business, and I've been providing sales training lately, and it is fascinating that I'm actually going to, after this, I'm going to create a video on why sales training doesn't work in this industry.
Yeah.
And it really is because people have too complicated of a process. And so it starts there. You got to dumb down your process and dumb down the way. Actually, before I knew what our topic was going to be, I was kind of digging into some of our past conversations and seeing that, one of the comments you made to me is, I've got to dumb this down for my people just so they can sell. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking, yeah, that's exactly what you have to do. You got to dumb it down so they can sell, and where other people they have a very complicated selling process because the process is set up to make sure that the job is done accurately, not
Yeah,
to get the job. You know,
yeah,
the first thing is let's get the sale, then let's do the sale, let's do the job right.
100%.
So, but and to me, it's the same thing. Look, I teach people how to create a sales presentation to sell your product and service. You got to do the same thing when you're selling your business.
Yep.
You got to get creative. You got to have that imagination. You got to show the benefits. You got to show the joy it is, and what are the advantages of owning a flooring company today. And a
Yeah.
lot of people bitch, gripe, and complain about it, but that's because that's what most people do, is bitch, gripe, and complain. But the reality is there's just tremendous amounts of opportunity in the flooring industry.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, this is from, I mean, obviously it's not a sexy business, but like from like all the other ones I see, like the profit margins and stuff, like it's very, very, appealing, I think. And like the real big thing too, like, I mean, especially like why I'm so adamant about, I have no relationship with Murphy brokers at all anymore, but like you give the agent or the broker the ball and he or she handles all of that, and then you can still focus on running the business, and you don't have to even think about it until, okay, I'm going to bring a buyer in, whatever. It's like, that's another thing, like when people are trying to sell, they take their eye off the ball, they get so focused on that. And
Right.
then it becomes obvious that the owner's really disengaged, and like, when the owner's away, the employees will play, that kind of grab. So
Yeah. I'm not sure I asked you. Did I ask you how long does it typically take to sell a business?
a year.
About a year.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you very, very rarely would you list it, and then within a month you're in the really drill and down phase. Because they first you gotta get it valued, then you gotta get it listed. Then Murphy would do all the marketing of it. They put it on blasted on every forum and whatever, biz buy sell. And then you gotta find buyers, you gotta vet the buyers, you gotta put together the financing package, you gotta do all the closing stuff with the lawyers, and yeah, it's a very long
And it's
process. And I
very, very frustrating. The first business I sold was in 2013. I had a company called Blind Devotion and window covering company. And what you're selling was goodwill, right? We had a great reputation, and but it's not like contracts, like I have government contracts and things like that. So they were just buying goodwill. So
yeah,
we use that 2 to 3 times multiplier, and they ended up we negotiated for about 2/3 of what I was looking for, but I also got a job with the company to stay
yeah,
on, and a very lucrative salary to stay on with that company. So again, we created a deal out of it. But I got to tell you, I fought for that sale.
yeah,
The guy came into town, we talked it over. He said he's interested in it, and then he went back, and I didn't hear anything from him for
yeah,
a little while. And I was getting pissed. I'm like, hey, that what the F, and I actually had a mentor say, you ought to go out to his place, show him you're serious. So I did. I flew out to Georgia from Arizona and met up with them and said, I want to check out your operation, see how you guys do things here. So I sent him
yeah,
a shock and awe package. I worked to sell the business. I did some things, and I had a broker, but I didn't sit on my hands. I was working to sell that business.
yeah,
And he did come back with an offer. We went back and forth a little bit, and came up with an offer we could agree on. But boy, it wasn't without a lot of effort.
yeah. I mean, even with a broker, there's still a lot of work that an owner's gonna have to do, and can't tell you how many times you have a good business, and then you get somebody 80% of the way, and then they get cold feet or they walk away. And then the owner just admit they're crushed, and now I got to start over from square
Right.
one. So it's a long road, and I mean, if you really got a good business that makes money, is clean, like if it's gonna, they're 87,000 new IRS agents, they're gonna need to take the middle class by their ankles and shake all the money out of the pocket. So you want to make sure everything's clean, the books are good. That I mean, I can't say it. I'm sure everybody does it, but the cash component of the business, keep that very as small as you can going into selling. So
Yeah, the advice I got from a broker one time is if you see a nickel, pick it up and put it in because that's worth 3 times the amount of money when you go to sell your business. Oh, lost your audio.
Uh-oh, so there.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, no. Now you're there.
Yeah, sorry, I got a dual screen set up and the camera's right in between them, so I'm kind of like split and it's a little weird. So my eyes aren't always at the camera, that's why I'm looking down.
Yeah. So, what was the last thing you were saying?
Basically keep about the cash portion.
Yeah, I was saying that a broker told me if you see a nickel on the ground, pick it up and put it in because it's worth 3 times when you
Yeah,
sell your business. So when you decide to sell your business, for the 2-3 years, whatever it takes,
start bothering cash.
yep, put the money in because that money's worth 3 times the amount when you go to sell
Yeah,
your
yeah.
business.
So really, I mean, if you want to sell one of these things, I mean, if you don't do any of that at all, you don't have anything to worry about. But you can either just like start, 2 to 3 years ahead of time. Start really
Right.
everything 100%. So
But everybody should position their business for sale because if it's positioned for sale, that means it's running without you and you could sell it. When I started my business, I wanted to sell it and be able to sell it, so and be able to walk away. Um, so it wasn't a matter of wanting to sell it. It was I wanted the ability to sell it. And that worked out great because my son bought it. So,
yeah,
and even our deal between him and I took a few months to put together.
yeah,
Even though at the very beginning we agreed on everything, but going through the SBA, going through all the steps, back and forth on contracts, and I still made a lot of mistakes on that deal, but we came to an agreement and got that sold, and that took a few months, even with
yeah,
a willing buyer and a willing seller. So this doesn't happen fast for anyone.
yeah. Even in those circumstances, I mean, that was always the first thing we'd ask an owner. Do you have any children or relatives that might want this? Because that's the easiest way to do it.
Right.
But it's still, that takes a lot of time and effort. But
yeah, with the kids, and then you really have to be creative. You got to structure a deal, and you got to have that imagination to go ahead and create a deal. Oh, lost you again. Lost your audio. There you go.
Sorry. But yeah, you got to be able to put together one of those deals without it blowing up the family. So usually, they'll work out. Like in your case, I guys are good, but yeah, I mean, it can be done. It's challenging, but and yeah, I'd say everybody should, like you said, position their business for sale. Like you want to build, like I build county flooring into a real asset. That has a process that doesn't need me here, and that less involved owner. That is a good
Nice.
thing.
Yeah.
Plus, it's
that's because you don't know anything about flooring.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean,
that's the biggest benefit you have.
yeah, you come in. But yeah, it's nice because I feel like if you get it right, you have the system in place and all that, like I don't have to work that hard as the owner, which is
Right.
nice. You take
Yeah.
all the risk and all that, but yeah.
That was nice for me. I wasn't working very hard in my business. My son was doing most of the work. So, but even he's got the ability to take off he's taken off for 2 weeks at a time, and business runs fine without him.
Yeah.
So, all right, now, John, great conversation. So I'll go ahead and get this posted up, and but gonna go ahead and close out our show here.
All right. Thanks, Jerry. I appreciate it.
All right, great. Thank you. Hey, thanks for joining the Flooring Business Podcast. If you'd like to have a one-on-one discovery call for your flooring business, we can review where you're at now and how you can increase sales and profits by over 30%. Go to jerrylevinson.com. In there's a free assessment tool where you can score your business and see which areas need the most improvement. Okay, everybody have a great profitable week, and we'll see you on the flip side.